Luffy's Gear 5 is busted, but the anime has just shown us how ridiculous it really is. Where according to Kaido, it's like he has two different devil fruits altogether. But what if I told you that Oda gave us hints to this from the very beginning?
No way!
Yep, the idea of Luffy's fruit being not just a paramecia was thrown at us early as chapter 387 with the introduction of his gears. Seriously, tell me which other paramecia devil fruit uses has multiple different forms. That's right, no one else. In fact, zones are the only ones who have shown forms of transformation to even other users who transition between their hybrid to a fully fledged embodiment of their zones. The difference between paramecias and zones is the actualization of their fruits, where the latter's biological makeup itself changes, whilst paramecias just enhances. An example is Doffy, who uses strings but his body doesn't become strings, whereas Luffy's fruit changed his entire DNA without even turning it on like a switch. He is always rubber. Before Gear 5, we might have thought that his fruit could have been a special paramecia like Katakuri's, but their fruits are completely apart. Katakuri has shown us that his body is not mochi all the time. Unlike Luffy, he can turn it off, as we have seen when he stabbed his own leg and blood came gushing out instead of mochi. So with that, Luffy being his own was pretty set from the very beginning. But what other clues did Oda give us? Well, let's start with Gear 1. Yep, Gear 1 Luffy, or better known as his base form, is the simplest application of his powers, which is the ability to stretch in any way he wants. I mean, okay, get your mind off the gutter. What are you doing to this video? Apart from typically stretching, he can also incorporate all properties of rubber to his entire body. This includes immunity to electricity, blunt forces, and with some creativity, Luffy is able to increase the overall impact of all of his attacks, simply by stretching his body to then rely on the sharp recoil. This is the purest form of Luffy's paramecia abilities. Yes, although the Nika fruit is a mythical zone, as Kaido stated, it's nothing like we have seen before, as it exhibits paramecia-like effects. Even in its awakening, Luffy has both the zone boost of advanced strength, durability, and recovery, along with the paramecia effect of sharing his abilities to the surrounding, where he ends up making everything into rubber, or cartoon-like, basically Toonverse. However, the difference between this and other paramecia awakenings is that Luffy can even affect living beings, and what makes Luffy's awakening special is that Haki is what fuels it all. So becoming rubber-like is just part of the fruit's base power, on top of Luffy's ability to awaken, becoming Sun God Nika, which we'll talk more about later. As now, we move on to the first Zoan transformation Luffy ever unlocked, which is his Gear 2. But wait, to achieve this and maintain the enormous amount of energy Luffy expends, he has to eat a lot. So we have to give credit to his chef, which sadly, now that I think about it, not all of us has a Sanji in our lives. Well, cheer up, because we got you with Factor 75. It's the most convenient food box in the Grand Line, with no prep and no mess. Keto sorted. 1 low calories, no problem. Vegan, well, Factor 75 has something for everyone to help you reach your goals to become the Pirate King. It can be tempting to order a takeout whilst, you're binging One Piece, but the post-takeout clarity is not a nice feeling. Trust me, I know. But with Factor 75, it's all the convenience of a takeout. Just, well, healthy. All thanks to their Sanji standard chef-prepared meals. Want a quick snack? Grab a smoothie and just heat up a meal within 2 minutes. My favorite has to be the protein plan. After all, Luffy said it best. So use my link or go to factor75.com and use the code POGAnimeOg50 for 50% of your first box. Oh yeah, you can just simply scan the QR code right now. Now Luffy's Gear 2 is the power to pump blood extremely fast throughout his body, meaning he gets more oxygen and other nutrients delivered to his cells at a faster rate than normal. This process is even compared to doping by Lucci, as it's an artificial increase in strength rather than being natural unnatural. But this is only possible thanks to Luffy's organs and blood vessels being made out of rubber, meaning they can withstand the expansion and contraction at a faster rate without tearing. Now once again, this was a major clue in letting us know that his devil fruit was always a Zoan, as this doesn't consistently align with what a paramecia devil fruit should be able to do. Luffy wasn't performing a new technique or an effect, rather all he is doing is manipulating his already rubber transformed body. And another thing which could be a stretch is that the pumping of his blood and effectively the pumping of his heart is the prerequisite of the drums of liberation. Yes, as you keep watching, you will learn that every one of his gears was indeed the build up to his gear 5. However, with gear 2, Luffy is able to greatly enhance his physical abilities to the point of completely outspeeding the Rokushiki technique Shave, which, mind you, is only learnt after years of extensive training. This insane increase in acceleration allowed Luffy to generate enough force to completely destroy the Iron Body technique. In fact, during the Impel Down arc, Luffy even managed to overwhelm Blackbeard in a single punch, despite him being someone, who fought and beat Ace. However, just like most doping agents like steroids and drugs, there are some major drawbacks to this form, which is of course a direct result of Luffy speeding up how fast his body is getting the nutrients. By consuming everything so much faster, Luffy is using more oxygen, energy and nutrition, which as a result of his metabolism causes Luffy to be much more hungrier than usual, even basically paralyzing him. He goes through an extreme fatigue. But the true repercussion of Gear 2 is, as stated by Rob Lucci, the effect it has on Luffy's life force, where the rapid pumping of blood causes the heart to work on overdrive. To negate this weakness, with the help of Rayleigh, Luffy learned how to apply his Gear 2 in shorter bursts, rather than keeping it constantly active whenever he fights. And thanks to Luffy mastering Haki, he's able to utilize attacks like Red Hawk, where he generates such speed and force, causing the friction to burn his fist in fire. Oh really? Is that how it works? Well, if that's true, then how did Luffy manage to use it underwater? Now, we don't need to really overthink this, as this is One Piece and anything really can happen in this universe, but there is a simple answer, which is Red Hawk only exists due to the true nature of Luffy's fruit, which is imagination. Yes, as crazy as it sounds, Luffy thought that such an attack like that was possible, and thanks to his belief, the effects of this power becomes reality. In fact, as I said, Gear 2's concept is a precursor to his actual awakening. Remember, a Zoan's awakening grants the user a boost in speed, strength, and durability. Luffy big-brained his way into achieving this, well, at least the first half, which was speed in Gear 2, and he does the rest with his other forms of transformation. Hence, if Gear 2 is about speed and impact, Gear 3 is about pure mass and power. Gear 3 is the power to inflate his bones in a particular limb, increasing its destructive power and size. And for even more damage, Luffy can add armament and Conqueror's Haki to his fist along with Ryu, further increasing the potency of his attacks. Now, although it was before the time skip, initially Luffy would turn into the size of a dwarfed child after using Gear 3, but he overcame this drawback, except again, this power makes no sense. I mean, come on. The method of which Luffy activates this power is even cartoonish to begin with. Even if Luffy is blowing highly compressed air into his bones, the idea of being able to push air through your thumb is just wacky, let alone uncontrollably decompressing afterwards, turning into a tiny child. Even his clothes shrink. I mean, again, there is an explanation for it, and you guessed it, it's the power of imagination through Sun God Nika. Yep, it happens because Luffy believes that bigger is better. This gear even has a similar consequence to that of Gear 5, as in its awakening, after he runs out of steam, Luffy decompresses, shriveling up into an old frail man. In fact, if we think about it, a lot of Luffy's moves and techniques so far were actually inspired by fighting styles and powers of other characters that Luffy had seen throughout the series. And this is the key to Luffy's true ability, linking to his incredible imagination. For instance, Luffy's Gomu Gomu no pistol was established after he witnessed Shanks and his crew shoot up the bandits. Red Rock was also inspired by Ace and Gear 3 from the giants he met in Little Garden, so on and so forth. In fact, during his training with Rayleigh in Ruskaina, Luffy met dangerous wild beast that inspired him into creating the next zone transformation, being Gear 4.
Gear 4 is about combining everything that Luffy has learned so far while pushing his devil fruit and haki to its limits. This sequential progress is shown by Luffy activating Gear 4 in a similar manner to Gear 3. He does it by blowing into his body, but instead of the thumb, it's his arm this time. The difference here is that he inflates his muscular structure instead and distributes the air a bit more evenly as opposed to Gear 3 where he inflates just his bones. He then imbues himself with armor and haki as his whole body becomes inflated, which brings to the first form of Gear 4, Bound Man. With this, Luffy becomes like a rubber ball that causes him to bounce endlessly, while focusing more on compression and force by utilizing haki to add a layer of resistance. With that in mind, Luffy reimagined all of his original techniques, incorporating them into this newfound power. For example, Luffy's finishing blow, the Gomu Gomu no Bazooka, is modified as the Leo Bazooka, which has more impact, but Luffy has to close the distance to land this attack, which he achieves by becoming more spring-like, boosting his speed and unlocking flight. Once again, Luffy has quite shamelessly stolen another power from a different devil fruit, this time Bellamy's. However, Luffy actually improved upon it and applied this spring-like nature to more facets than just mobility by joining it with his attacks. The ability to do anything the user wants paired with Luffy's great imagination is what allows him to essentially utilize all kinds of powers he wants into his own fruit ability. This was also the case when Gear 5 Luffy turned into a literal giant in his fight against Kaido, essentially emulating San Juan Wolf's devil fruit, the Deka Deka no Mi, even if he had never seen him. Luffy just got this idea from seeing other giants simply exist and realized the potential of his Gear 3 but applied to his whole body. As long as Luffy can imagine it, he can recreate almost any devil fruit power and even improve upon them. Bellamy was only able to bounce on walls and floors, whereas Luffy is straight up able to fly using the very same ability by bouncing off of the air. His speed becomes incomparable as he flies across the distances of towns in just a few seconds, and even appears behind Doflamingo despite him being on guard. As this flight is based on the ability to bounce, Luffy is able to redirect and have great control over where and how he flies, which is one other thing that Luffy shamelessly stole. Yep, we've seen it before, and it's the Rokushiki technique of Geppo. It's essentially just taking the air many times in one instance to fly, but this works far better with Luffy's elastic body, reinforcing just how ingrained the aspect of imagination is to not only his fruit power but also his fighting style. Luffy's insane creativity is what allowed him to even come with his next few variations of Gear 4, one being Tank Man. Its sole purpose is to increase the defense of Luffy by eating food. Yep, after Luffy has fattened himself up, he becomes the main weapon, utilizing the recoil of others' attacks to bounce them off him. But the main drawback to this form is the lackluster mobility and great offense when compared to the other forms. Despite how strong Gear 4 is, there are some drawbacks like the insane depletion of Luffy's haki reserves. This limits the time he can use this form, along with the cooldown of 10 minutes before he can reuse haki again. But with the final form of Gear 4, Luffy doesn't need much time to body his opponents with Snake Man. If Bound was inspired by gorillas, Snake Man, well, it's inspired by snakes, but this form focuses more on speed and offense while giving up on defense. For example, the attack Python becomes greatly enhanced as Luffy is able to not only just retain the speed that his arms have while stretching and redirecting, but as they continue to stretch and turn, they even accelerate. This means that even if an opponent dodges his attacks, the punches will only grow stronger and stronger before finally landing an extremely devastating blow. In Snake Man, Luffy is able to use other attacks that he normally can't in Bounce Man, one of them being Hydra. Hydra is a variation of Python and his Black Mamba attacks, which essentially uses rapid-fire punches together with the accelerating and bending of his arms to land powerful hits at an incredible rate. But what truly makes Hydra stand out from the other two is the usage of advanced observation haki or future sight. This makes it so that Luffy can pin down whoever his opponent is and barrage them with the most unpredictable omnidirectional attacks possible. An attack like this makes it hard for any opponent to even move. This was even true for Kaido. Despite his exceptional fighting capabilities, he not only got injured but even started bleeding. Let me remind you that Kaido is quite literally the toughest character in the whole of One Piece. There's only a few ways someone can actually damage him, and the fact that this attack hurt Kaido that badly should prove how effective it actually is. But what's interesting is that Kaido talks about how little sense it makes for rubber to be able to change trajectory given its nature. Rubber is all about elasticity, and that means that anytime it's stretched, it retracts. To endlessly stretch like Gear 4 does makes no sense at all, and the truth is that this is the result of Gear 5. In fact, Gear 4 releases steam which wrap around Luffy's neck like a scarf, just like it does for some other zones and as it does in Gear 5, showcasing that Gear 4 was just one of the stepping stones on a long path to achieve what the true nature of Luffy's Devil Fruit is, even if he himself had no idea. All in all, Luffy's Devil Fruit ability allows him to produce effects only limited by what he has experienced. This has always been the case. Luffy has seen guns, rifles, giants, later crazy strong animals, and then even stronger fighters he faced off against. All of these life experiences helped Luffy's creativity and allowed his body to mold into what is needed to achieve the effect he wants. This then moves us to the awakening of the Hito no Mi Maro Nika. When Luffy activated his Gear 5, his heart started beating hard and loud in a rhythmic manner. Zunisha called this the drums of liberation, recalling how Joy Boy over 800 years ago would go into this state producing the same beat. The name was likely due to the liberation which followed this transformation, both to the surrounding and to the user itself. Luffy's heart, made out of rubber, is able to beat this hard without tearing. This would in effect give Luffy incredible strength and speed, similar to the pills Hody Jones ingested to become as strong as he did in Fishman Island. In this form, you know, Hody even had the white hair and he turned into an old man after the effects of the pills were gone, just like Luffy did, you know? So that's pretty similar. In this form, Luffy's hair and clothes turn white. His eyes glow with the white ring-like pupils and white clouds float around his neck. Luffy, with the use of his haki, is able to fuel the power of the fruit and extend its effects to his surroundings, showcasing the paramecia part of the Nika fruit. During his fight with Kaido, he was able to deflect attacks by bending the ground and his surroundings as though it was rubber. He was also able to affect other living things as he did by stretching Kaido. Luffy could even turn the particles in space into rubber, allowing him to walk through air. The extensive sharing of his rubber properties don't stop there though, as Luffy even managed to catch lightning and throw it as though he is the god of thunder Zeus himself. However, with all that said, there's also another ability that arises with Luffy's Gear 5, which was to make his surroundings similar to that of a gag comic book. Along with himself, those who were affected by his haki exhibited Looney Tunes-like effects, with their eyes popping out and looking more cartoonish. In Kaido's own words, it's akin to something out of a comic strip or manga. Some examples of this are Luffy's arms becoming like Popeye, or being hit to the head from Kaido's Hasakai only for Luffy's head to wrap around the Kanabo in a comedic fashion. Like, his awakening seems as though it changes reality itself. But remember, Luffy's fruit isn't a paramecia, but it's a mythical zone with paramecia-like effects. So with his awakening, Luffy also got the zone boost of an increase in overall stats. We talking power, speed, durability, and recovery. This was something Luffy was already trying to achieve with his other gears, and everything in his arsenal to a greater degree. Gear 3, for instance, allowed Luffy to gigantify certain parts of his body, but when awakened, Luffy was able to turn into a literal giant, not just one part of his body. The thought of giant Luffy activating Gear 2 achieving blitz speed while being this ginormous would be a planet level disaster, alright? Let's not go that far, man. Island level disaster, okay. Seriously though, in this state, Luffy is able to utilize his previous gears in conjunction without the need of any preparation. However, we move on to the fact that this fruit literally does not have limitations to its growth. In chapter 1047, Luffy showcases the extent to which he can increase parts of his body, as he was able to gigantify his hands to the size of an entire island. When I say this power truly depends on the user's imagination, I'm not kidding, because Luffy literally creates goggles from the hair on his head. The Nika fruit by far is the strongest ability in the entire series, as it is only limited by its user's imagination and haki, where the latter is the fuel for its power. Yes, when Kaido thought Luffy was done with him turning into an old prune man, all he had to do was push his will to restart the drums of liberation in his heart. And just as quick, Gear 5 was back. It has the ultimate offense, defense, and adaptability, so how in the world do you balance this kind of power? Well, Oda's answer was putting Luffy in a retirement home. From chapter 1070, we know that Luffy takes approximately 32 seconds to revert back from an old man into his normal form. However, like other zones, Luffy's base state and different gears could be a hybrid form of the fruit, where his awakening is the full transformation. However, due to its mysterious nature, it is possible the full transformation is still yet to be seen. Regardless though, this fruit also brings the will of Nika into reality, as the user becomes the means to liberate the world. Luffy's journey of sharing his freedom to friends and kingdoms isn't a coincidence. It all links back to the power of the Nika fruit. Luffy from the very beginning has been resonating the ability of his devil fruit to his surroundings by freeing the oppressed and making everyone laugh on his way to the One Piece. This is the will of the devil fruit, the Hitoito no Mi model Nika. But if you want to learn more about Luffy and how busted he actually is in Gear 5, then click the video on screen right now.